Everybody knows who has been the most dominant team in the Premier League in the last 10 years. That, of course, is Manchester City. 4 Premier League titles in the last 6 years, won everything under the sun, and they just won a treble. And arguably, they might be the greatest Premier League side ever. But for every single champion and for every single great team, there always needs to be someone playing second fiddle. And for Manchester City, that was Liverpool. But Liverpool might be the greatest second fiddle ever, because if Manchester City didn't exist, they themselves might have those 4 Premier League titles. They could be one of the greatest teams in history, but they found themselves playing second fiddle. They were the only team that went toe-to-toe with Manchester City and found themselves out on the other side as winners. And that great team, that historic Liverpool team, possibly the greatest Liverpool team ever, that team that took the same great Manchester City side to the last days of the season, year after year, all of a sudden in a year span, found themselves scraping for Europa League spots. And then coming into this season, in the transfer window, people were saying they needed a rebuild. How has that great of a team gone from scraping for Europa League spots, needing a rebuild? But is it all that bleak? Because we're 5 games into the season, Liverpool have won 4 out of 5. They've garnered the same amount of points that you expect of a title contender. So have Liverpool finally found themselves back at the top? Well, maybe not fully. If you look at the table, it looks like Liverpool are title contenders. They won 4 out of 5. They look great. But that's just the table. But if you look at the performances in those 5 games, it isn't quite up to scratch. It isn't what you'd expect of a title contender. The first game against Chelsea, they drew 0-0 and it didn't look great. Second game, they obviously won. Bournemouth and Villa were somewhat convincing performances, but in the first halves of both of those games, they really found themselves on the back foot to lesser teams. And they had quite horrible performances. And against Newcastle, they were down to 10 men. They had their backs against the wall for the whole game, and it took 2 incredible efforts from Darwin Núñez to push them over the edge. Last weekend, against Wolves, in the first 45 minutes, Liverpool looked terrible. Absolutely terrible, looked nothing like a top side, looked nothing like a contender, and if anything, Wolves looked like the top half side that were competing for Premier League titles. The way that Wolves ran through that Liverpool midfield and that whole Liverpool side, play after play after play, Pedro Neto looking like the second coming of Jesus. Liverpool looked so out of it. Incoherent, passes going 2-3 feet wide of every single player. No one looked on the ball. But yet, halftime came. I don't know what Klopp did, but he must have given them a right talking, because Luis Diaz came on, Darwin Núñez came on, and all of a sudden, they found themselves 3-1 up. And after such a horrendous performance in the first half, they looked good again in the second. And that's been quite the story. That's been the story of Liverpool this whole season. They've had terrible performances in the first 20 to 30 minutes, or even 80 minutes against Newcastle, but then somehow they find a way to come back. And that's the reason why they find themselves near the top of the Premier League table. But those performances don't really suggest a title winning side or a title contender at all. If anything, they suggest the opposite. They suggest an inconsistent side that aren't able to string passages of plays together for a full 90 minutes. And they don't look like a team that could go on to win 10 games on a bounce like they used to. But they're still getting the results. I mean, they've still won 4 games. They've won 4 out of 5. No matter how bad they played, they've still won 4 games. There's a reason they're still towards the top of the Premier League. If you're an optimist, you could say that all those games that they've been playing bad and still found themselves a way to win, all of a sudden they could start clicking, and those bad performances could just start turning into good performances. And all of a sudden, Liverpool look like a juggernaut running through the Premier League. But will they click? Will they find a time where they can click? Well, they've given themselves a chance. Instead of being 2-2 and having 2 draws or 2 losses or anything like that, they've found themselves 4 wins in the first 5 games. And all of a sudden, they could be 10-15 games into the season, really find their groove, and they could look like a true title contender. And considering how bad they play, that'd be a win. They've given themselves a chance, and no matter how bad they played, it could all switch in just a second. So who knows? maybe Liverpool can find that second gear. Maybe all of their players can switch on, and maybe they can be switched on for the whole 90 minutes and find those and turn those bad performances and results into good performances and results. And obviously it could go the other way, where they start to play worse and those bad performances turn into no results. But it damn sure could go the other way. And we could see Liverpool back at the top of the Premier League, where they should rightfully be. Because it would be disappointing to see that great of a Liverpool side only walking away with one Premier League. So I guess what's next for Liverpool is to be able to play a full 90 minutes where they look like one of the top sides in the Premier League. And they can do it away from home as well, because everybody knows they can do it at Anfield. And who knows, maybe we could have a 3-team title race. But what about Wolves? The team that dominated Liverpool in the first 45 minutes, found themselves 1-0 up and then lost 3-1. This is a team that will definitely be in a relegation battle. They need wins like this, or they need to at least come out of it with a draw, considering how well they played in that first half. Pedro Neto, probably the standout. Belgrade, or I don't know his name exactly, but he was absolutely everywhere in that midfield. Gomez, Lamina, Dawson, Kilman. Basically, that whole team had an extremely good performance in the first half. But the way that midfield was overworking itself, doing everything they can to win the ball back against Liverpool and be on the break, you could see that it gassed them out. And in the second half, as Liverpool found themselves and got back into their groove, they went and ran away with a game. So Wolves really need to seize those opportunities that they get in those first 45 minutes, because that's the same thing that happened against Manchester United. They ran through Manchester United and they got no result out of it. They lost 1-0 and they had nothing to show for that good performance. And the same thing here, 45 minutes of constant pressure against Liverpool, chance after chance after chance, and they only found themselves 1-0 up. I mean, Wolves should have easily been 2-3, 4-0 up even. I mean, guaranteed they should have been 2-0 up. There was a clear chance for Cunha, and he couldn't quite put it in. And if I'm Pedro Neto, I would be absolutely killing Cunha, because how well he played and the amount of chances he was creating, and he had no runners into the box, and he had no one finishing those chances that he was creating. It's pretty disappointing, considering how hard he worked on that wing. Even down to the last couple minutes, he was working as hard as he could for that Wolves side, and they couldn't find a way to repay him. And that's exactly why they found themselves losing 3-1 to Liverpool. I guess what's next for Wolves is to really seize those opportunities that they get in the first 20 to 30 minutes of a game, because of the amount of pressure that they put on a defense with their in-behind threats. They really need to seize those opportunities. They really need to go and put 2 or 3 past the team to see themselves through, because of how hard their midfield works and how much they're overran in those first couple of minutes. They're gonna gas out, and they don't really have the squad depth or the bench to be able to compensate for that gassing out. So they need to go and win in the first 60 minutes basically. Otherwise, Wolves will find themselves in another relegation battle. And with how good that team is, they should be nowhere near that. They should be really in the middle of the Premier League, middle of the table. So what about some of the other games? There was obviously Tottenham, who had an incredible comeback, and they are propelling themselves forward. And this Ange Postecoglou project keeps on winning and keeps on looking like the right decision made by the Tottenham higher-ups. But then on the other side of the spectrum, there's Manchester United losing to Brighton, and everybody is killing them. And there are problems where they have more statements than goals coming out of a game. They have Jadon Sancho absolutely unhappy. They have Erik ten Hag, who seems like he has a dressing room that he's incapable of taking care of. And it looks like Manchester United are in yet another season and yet again Manchester United find themselves as a dysfunctional side. But I don't think that's the whole story. I don't think you can look at this loss against Brighton as a real knock on Manchester United. Obviously they should be winning against Brighton at home, at Old Trafford, at a fortress that they created. But I think people need to cut some slack for Manchester United. Yes, they're dysfunctional. Yes, they're mismanaged and everything under the sun. But they have a lot of injuries. And year after year, this is how Manchester United have started. They start terribly and poorly, but they find themselves, gaining some momentum throughout the course of the season. Maybe that's just a coincidence because of what happened last season, but I truly think that throughout the course of the season, as that injury pile-up starts to dwindle and these players start to come back and integrating themselves into that team, I think Erik ten Hag can find a way to bring this side back into the top 4, where they obviously should be. But that's not enough for Manchester City and Manchester United. And I think that's the problem, obviously. They shouldn't be fighting for a top 4. They shouldn't be in a crisis in the first 5 games of the season, finally be gaining momentum throughout the course of the season. So I think, yes, that still is the problem. But in a vacuum and in a sense, in this season by itself, I think Manchester United will be fine. But there is still a huge problem there. Because, let's be honest, they're only going to be fighting for top 4 again. And yes, people saying that they were never going to be title contenders against the likes of a City or an Arsenal, they were nowhere near it yet. But I think they should have made a step closer at least. But I mean, come on, with the amount of money that they've spent, they really should be up there. The amount of money that they have spent after window after window after window, they should be up there with a Manchester City. They should be up there with an Arsenal. But yet they don't find themselves there, and they find themselves yet again scrapping for a top 4 spot. I don't know when it will change with Manchester United. That's 10 years. They've done absolutely nothing since Sir Alex Ferguson has left the club. And I think you have to look higher up. It has to be higher up. There's no way that every single player that Manchester United bring in and every single manager that Manchester United brings in, is a bad egg. There has to be something wrong higher up. There has to be something wrong around that club and the environment that they create for these players and these managers, because there's no way every single iteration of this Manchester United side since Sir Alex Ferguson has been unable to do the job and unable to meet the expectations of a Manchester United. I mean, those expectations have gone lower and lower and lower with each new season. It was seen as a success for Manchester United winning a Carabao Cup and finishing in the top 4 last season. What? Really? Carabao Cup in top 4? And that's probably the same thing this season. And I think that's the trouble with Ten Hag. He's in a lose-lose. He won a trophy. He got them into the top 4 last season. So he has to do better. And I don't think United can really do better. Their ceiling really is just an FA Cup or a Carabao Cup and coming in top 4. And probably not even third. With the resurgence of Liverpool, they might well just be 4th. But as I said, yes, Manchester United are in a crisis, but in a vacuum of this season, I think they'll be fine. Manchester United, they have so many injuries, and I think those players really, you need to give them a chance. You need to let those players come back. You need to let them reintegrate themselves back into the squad, and I think Erik ten Hag can find a way. But obviously there are problems there.